On March 25, 2026, a video began circulating on social media that the entire defense world stopped to watch. It was taken from a rooftop or upper story window somewhere in the Iranian port city of Chabahar in the country's southeastern Sistan and Balochistan province. In the footage, a U.S. Navy fighter jet is visible flying at low altitude over the city, and the distinctive rapid zipping sound of its 20mm rotary cannon can be clearly heard as it conducts a strafing run against Iranian military positions. The aircraft makes a sharp left-hand brake turn, a maximum performance high-G maneuver pilots use to reverse direction or evade a threat. Then a missile comes into view. It passes near the aircraft's tail and explodes. The jet completes its turn and flies away, apparently intact. The Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps immediately claimed the aircraft had been hit and crashed into the Indian Ocean. U.S. Central Command responded with equal immediacy, denying that any American fighter aircraft had been shot down by Iran. The carefully worded statement, confirming no shootdown without explicitly ruling out that the aircraft had been struck, only deepened the debate among open-source analysts examining the footage frame by frame. The Aviationist, one of the most reliable sources on military aviation, reviewed multiple video angles and concluded the most likely outcome was a very close near miss, probably from an Iranian man-portable air defense system, a manpads fired by someone on the ground below. The aircraft, an A-18 Super Hornet, appears to have escaped. It was flying over downtown Chabahar with its cannon firing. That fact alone would have seemed almost inconceivable a few weeks earlier. When Operation Epic Fury began on February 28, 2026, the opening phase looked like every modern American air campaign had looked since 1991. Long-range cruise missiles in the first hours, stealth bombers penetrating defended airspace, electronic warfare aircraft suppressing radar networks, and fighter jets launching precision-guided munitions from standoff ranges. What the Chabahar footage showed was something different. It showed that by mid-March, enough of Iran's integrated air defense network had been destroyed that American carrier-based fighters were now flying low over Iranian port cities and shooting their guns. The A-18 Super Hornet, the most widely deployed carrier-based strike fighter in American history, was not just participating in this campaign. In critical ways, it was defining it. This is the full story of the A-18, from the Hornet to the Super Hornet to the Block 3 configuration flying over Iran today. We begin with what the aircraft is doing right now, in the most significant American air campaign since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Then we go deep into the technology, the engines, the radar, the weapons, the survivability systems, and the upgrades that have kept the design relevant through 4 decades of continuous combat service. And then we trace the full history of the aircraft, from its origins in a Cold War competition for a lightweight fighter that the Navy was not supposed to be interested in, through every combat deployment the Hornet and Super Hornet have ever made, all the way to the contested skies of 2026. The USS Abraham Lincoln, a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, is operating in the Arabian Sea south of Iran. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the Navy's newest and most advanced carrier, is in the Red Sea after transiting the Suez Canal from its previous position in the eastern Mediterranean. From both flight decks, F/A-18E and F/A-18F Super Hornets are launching around the clock, joining a strike campaign that, as of late March 2026, has struck over 10,000 Iranian targets since the first bombs fell on February 28. 3 carrier strike groups are operating in the theater, an unusual concentration of American naval power. The Ford's Carrier Air Wing 8 includes Strike Fighter Squadron 87, VFA-87, whose aircraft were seen in official CENTCOM imagery being armed and prepared for launch from the carrier's forward catapults. Among the aircraft visible in that imagery was Super Hornet Bureau number 168,912, side number 402, a jet with a very particular piece of history painted on it. That aircraft carries a small kill marking on its fuselage, a silhouette recording the fact that it was the jet that shot down a Syrian Air Force Su-22 fighter bomber over Syria on June 18, 2017, scoring the first air-to-air kill by any American military pilot since 1999. Now, nearly 9 years later, that same aircraft is operating over the Middle East again, this time as part of the largest American military operation in a generation. The role of the Super Hornet in Operation Epic Fury has been described by defense analysts as that of the campaign's workhorse. Defense analyst Steve Balestrieri, writing for 1945, characterized the Super Hornet as the indispensable center of the Navy's strike packages. The operational structure of the campaign was built around three interlinked objectives: suppress and destroy Iran's air defense network using A-18 Growlers alongside F-35C stealth fighters, strike Iran's nuclear enrichment and weaponization infrastructure, and degrade the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' offensive military capability, including its ballistic and cruise missile launch systems. The Super Hornet has been directly involved in all three phases. In the opening days of the campaign, Super Hornets flying from the Lincoln and the Ford were primarily launching standoff weapons against Iranian targets from safer distances, using the AGM-158 Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile, or JASM, alongside Joint Direct Attack Munitions, Joint Standoff Weapons, and laser-guided bombs. The aircraft's APG-79 Active Electronically Scanned Array Radar and ATFLIR targeting pod gave crews the ability to locate, identify, and engage targets with precision in any weather condition around the clock. As the campaign progressed and Iran's air defense network was systematically degraded by the combination of SEAD operations, Tomahawk cruise missile strikes, and the work of the Growler electronic warfare aircraft, the operational envelope expanded. By mid-March, U.S. Navy Super Hornets were flying not just strike missions, but also low-altitude operations over Iranian coastal areas, the kind of close engagement that the Chabahar incident documented. EA-18G Growlers, the electronic warfare derivative of the Super Hornet's airframe and the aircraft that flew alongside the strike packages suppressing Iranian radar and missile systems, were described by the 1945 analysis as providing critical electronic warfare support that made the Super Hornets' increasingly aggressive operations possible. CENTCOM imagery released during the campaign has shown Super Hornets refueling from U.S. Air Force KC-135 Stratotanker aircraft over the Central Command Area of Responsibility, a joint force refueling arrangement that extended the aircraft's time on station significantly and allowed the Navy jets to maintain pressure on Iranian targets without constantly cycling back to the carrier for fuel. The KC-135 to Super Hornet refueling was described by Army recognition as a visible link in a much larger joint kill chain, converting fighter presence into sustained combat effect by keeping aircraft on station longer, waiting for time-sensitive targets, and escorting strike packages deeper into Iranian territory. The broader carrier aviation architecture in the theater, as documented by defense journalists, and the Zona Militar analysis of the campaign's weapons systems, deployed the USS Gerald R. Ford's Air Wing in the eastern Mediterranean initially, with the ship's aircraft operating alongside Israeli assets, while the Abraham Lincoln's Air Wing took the primary strike role from the Arabian Sea against Iranian territory itself. Super Hornets from both carriers flew the majority of the strike sorties. On March 15, 2026, a particularly significant detail emerged from an analysis published by The Aviationist. The specific Super Hornet, with bureau number 168912, the jet that had shot down the Syrian Su-22 in 2017, was visible in CENTCOM-released footage being launched from the Ford's forward catapults, clearly armed for combat. That aircraft, belonging to VFA A-7 within Carrier Air Wing 8, had been continuously operating from the Ford since the ship was rushed back across the Atlantic in February 2026, ahead of the campaign's start. The Ford had already been through multiple deployments in recent months, and the pace of operations in Epic Fury represented an even higher operational tempo on top of an already demanding schedule. The Super Hornet's versatility has also manifested in unexpected ways during the campaign. Aircraft were tasked with intercepting Iranian aerial threats, including drones and missiles targeting American bases and Allied positions in the region. The A-18's high maneuverability, combined with the AIM-120 AMRAAM and AIM-9X Sidewinder missiles that are standard carriage items on combat missions, made it effective in the air-to-air defensive role alongside its primary strike duties. When Iranian-backed militia forces using drones attempted to threaten carrier strike group assets or regional American bases, Super Hornets were among the assets dispatched to engage them. The near-miss incident over Chabahar, wherever it ultimately lands in the historical record, illustrates something important about what the campaign had become by late March 2026. The shift from standoff precision strikes to low-altitude gun runs over Iranian cities was not primarily a story about a single close call. It was a story about what the systematic destruction of Iran's integrated air defense network had made possible. The aircraft doing those low-altitude missions, the A-18 Super Hornet, was the same aircraft that had opened the campaign 3 weeks earlier from standoff range with precision-guided munitions. Its ability to transition between those operational envelopes, from high-altitude standoff strike to low-altitude close engagement, without requiring a different aircraft or a different crew, is the deepest expression of what the A-18 design philosophy was always about. The A-18 Super Hornet is a twin-engine, carrier-capable, multi-role fighter aircraft. It comes in two primary variants, the single-seat F/A-18E and the two-seat F/A-18F, in which the second crew position is occupied by a naval flight officer functioning as a weapons and sensor officer. A third variant, the EA-18G Growler, is the dedicated electronic warfare version of the F-model airframe and is covered separately in the channel's Growler video. All Super Hornets in U.S. service are currently in the Block 2 or Block 3 configuration, with Block 3 representing the current production standard and the variant most commonly flying combat missions in 2026. The Super Hornet is larger than the legacy Hornet it descended from, and largely replaced. It is 60 feet, 1 inch in length, stands 16 feet tall, and has a wingspan of 44 feet 9 inches with wings extended, folding to a considerably narrower span for carrier hangar storage. The airframe is roughly 25% larger than the original FA-18CD Hornet, and the Super Hornet is approximately 7,000 pounds heavier in empty weight and 15,000 pounds heavier at maximum takeoff weight, despite having 42% fewer structural parts than the original design. Maximum takeoff weight is 66,000 pounds. Empty weight is approximately 32,000 pounds. The aircraft is powered by two General Electric F414GE400 turbofan engines, each producing 22,000 pounds of thrust in afterburner. The F414 was derived from the Hornet's F404 engine but incorporates advances developed for other programs and delivers 35% more thrust across most of the flight envelope than the F404 it replaced. Top speed exceeds Mach 1.8. Service ceiling is above 50,000 feet. The combat radius in a standard configuration with two air-to-air missiles is approximately 390 to 500 nautical miles depending on mission profile, extended to approximately 500 nautical miles in the Block 3 configuration, equipped with conformal fuel tanks. Maximum ferry range with external fuel tanks exceeds 1,800 nautical miles. The twin-engine configuration is not simply a performance choice. For a carrier-based aircraft operating over open ocean, two engines provide a margin of safety that a single-engine design cannot match. An aircraft that loses one engine in flight still has thrust, still has hydraulics, still has the ability to make it back to the carrier or to a divert airfield. The F414 engines are also designed for high resistance to foreign object damage and stall, crucial for operations from carrier decks where debris is a constant concern. Each engine attaches to the airframe at only 10 points and can be replaced by a small maintenance team in under 20 minutes, a feature directly inherited from the original F404 and reflecting the Navy's deep operational emphasis on rapid turnaround at sea. The rectangular air intakes of the Super Hornet are one of its most visually distinctive features and one of the most significant departures from the original Hornet's design. Where the legacy Hornet used rounded pitot-type inlets, the Super Hornet's rectangular inlets with fixed ramps serve two purposes. They accommodate the higher airflow requirements of the more powerful F-414 engines, and their geometry contributes to a reduced radar cross-section compared to the curved surfaces of older inlet designs. The Super Hornet is not a stealth aircraft in the way the F-35 is designed from the ground up for radar signature reduction, but the rectangular inlets, the use of radar-absorbent materials in critical locations, and other signature management features incorporated in the Block 3 configuration reduce its radar cross-section meaningfully compared to the original Hornet. The Block 3's signature reduction efforts include what Boeing described in advanced Super Hornet demonstrations as approximately a 50% reduction in frontal radar cross-section compared to the original design, using a combination of inlet radar blocking features, materials, and shaping modifications. The Block 3 conformal fuel tanks represent the most significant external change visible on current production Super Hornets. These tanks, mounted along the upper fuselage contour rather than hanging from hardpoints, add approximately 3,500 pounds of additional fuel without consuming any of the aircraft's 11 external weapons hardpoints. The result is an increase in combat radius of approximately 120 nautical miles and a significant improvement in mission endurance, without requiring as many aerial refueling contacts or as many buddy tanking sorties from other Super Hornets equipped with air-to-air refueling stores. Preserving the external hardpoints for weapons carriage rather than fuel tanks gives the Block 3 a meaningful improvement in weapons flexibility on the longest range missions. The aircraft has 11 hardpoints in total, 2 wingtip missile launch rails, 6 underwing hardpoints, and 3 under fuselage stations. Maximum external payload capacity is 17,750 pounds, which the Navy describes as including combinations of air-to-air missiles, air-to-surface missiles, precision-guided bombs, unguided bombs, and the various targeting and self-defense pods that are typically part of a combat configuration. The aircraft's ability to return to the carrier with an unusually large unspent load, known as bring-back capability, is important for carrier operations. The Super Hornet can recover aboard with over 9,000 pounds of unspent fuel and weapons, substantially more than the legacy Hornet, reducing the need to jettison stores before landing. The primary radar system is the Northrop Grumman AN/APG-79 Active Electronically Scanned Array, or AESA, which was introduced beginning with Block 2 aircraft from 2005 onward and has since been retrofitted across the surviving fleet. The APG-79 replaced the AN/APG-73 mechanically scanned radar that equipped earlier Super Hornets and all legacy Hornets. The difference between an AESA and a mechanically scanned radar is fundamental. A traditional radar moves its physical antenna to scan the sky, which limits how quickly it can shift attention between targets and how it can manage the antenna's motion. An AESA has no moving parts. It uses thousands of individual transmit-receive modules arranged in an array, each independently controlling its transmission and reception through electronic beam steering. The entire beam can be repositioned almost instantaneously, shifted across enormous angular ranges in fractions of a second, enabling the radar to track multiple air targets and simultaneously generate a high-resolution synthetic aperture radar map of the ground below. The APG-79 provides significantly longer detection range, better resistance to electronic countermeasures including jamming and spoofing, and the ability to conduct simultaneous air-to-air and air-to-ground operations in a way that mechanically scanned radars fundamentally cannot. The AESA also has significantly reduced probability of intercept compared to older radar types, meaning that adversary radar warning receivers are less likely to detect its emissions at long range, preserving some element of tactical surprise, even though the aircraft itself is not stealthy. The Block 3 aircraft carries additional processing upgrades that extend the APG-79's capabilities further, improving track quality, extending detection range against smaller targets, and integrating the radar output more tightly with the aircraft's other sensor systems. The electro-optical and infrared sensor primary pod is the Raytheon AN/ASQ-228 Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared, known as ATFLIR. The ATFLIR combines a mid-wave infrared sensor for thermal imaging, a visual band camera for daylight target identification, and a dual-mode laser for range finding and target designation. The laser designator allows the Super Hornet to guide its own laser-guided weapons, to impact and to illuminate targets for laser-guided weapons dropped by other aircraft. The system's magnification and stabilization allow precise target identification at ranges sufficient to keep the aircraft outside the threat envelopes of most man-portable and light vehicle-mounted air defense systems during initial target acquisition, though as the Chabahar incident illustrated, operating at low altitude over populated areas with undetected manpads threats is a different matter entirely. The AN/ASG-34 IRST-21 infrared search and track system, declared at initial operational capability in late 2024 in its Block 2 configuration, provides a passive infrared detection and tracking capability that fundamentally complements the active radar. The IRST uses the thermal signatures emitted by aircraft engines to detect and track aerial targets without emitting any radar energy at all. An adversary aircraft whose radar warning receiver would detect the Super Hornet's radar emissions and alert the pilot to being tracked cannot detect an IRST system, because the IRST neither emits nor triggers any detectable signal. In a contested airspace environment where adversaries are equipped with radar warning receivers and radar homing missiles, the ability to silently track a target before committing to an engagement changes the tactical dynamics significantly. The IRST-21 is mounted on the centerline external store station, freeing the hardpoints for weapons carriage. The communication suite includes the AN/ARC-210 VHF/UHF radio and the Multifunctional Information Distribution System Joint Tactical Radio System, known as MIDS-JTRS, which provides low-volume terminals for have-quick frequency hopping communications, SINC, GARS tactical radio compatibility, and Link 16 data connectivity. Link 16 is the standard tactical data link used by American and NATO forces, allowing aircraft to share radar tracks, targeting data, and situational awareness information in near real time across a wide network of participants. A Super Hornet pilot can see contacts detected by an AWACS aircraft hundreds of miles away, receive targeting data from a destroyer launching a Tomahawk, and share his own radar contacts with ground controllers and other aircraft simultaneously, all through the Link 16 connection. The Block Freeze Tactical Targeting Network Technology, or TTNT, adds a higher bandwidth data link for more demanding networking requirements, enabling faster transfer of larger data packages, including sensor imagery. The Block 3 cockpit replaces the multiple smaller multifunction displays of earlier Super Hornets with a large area display, a single 10-inch by 19-inch touchscreen that presents information in a configurable, intuitive format the pilot can adapt to the specific demands of the current mission. The touch interface reduces the number of physical button presses required to manage the aircraft's systems, lowering pilot workload during complex operations when simultaneous demands from the radar, weapon system, communications, and threat environment compete for attention. The large area display sits alongside a reference standby display and engine fuel display in a cockpit that has been continuously refined through operational feedback from decades of combat experience. Defensive systems include the Integrated Defensive Electronic Countermeasures Suite, combining the AN/ALQ-214 electronic jamming system, which detects radar emissions and jams them to protect the aircraft from radar-guided missiles, and the AN/ALR-67 radar warning receiver, which provides the pilot with precise characterization of radar threats, including type, bearing, and engagement state. The AN/ALE-47 countermeasures dispenser system releases infrared flares to decoy heat-seeking missiles and chaff clouds of metallic fibers to confuse radar-guided weapons. The Raytheon AN/ALE-55 fiber optic towed decoy is a more sophisticated defensive tool, deploying behind the aircraft on a fiber optic cable to a distance that places it outside the aircraft's own jamming field, where it re-emits jamming signals with higher power than the aircraft-mounted system can achieve, drawing radar-guided missiles toward the decoy and away from the aircraft. The internal cannon is the M61A2 Vulcan, an improved version of the M61A1 that has equipped American fighter aircraft since the 1950s. The M61A2 is a 20mm 6-barrel rotary cannon with a cyclic rate of approximately 6,000 rounds per minute in its high-rate mode. It carries 578 rounds of 20mm ammunition, sufficient for approximately 6 seconds of sustained fire at full rate, though in practice, engagement bursts are much shorter. The cannon is mounted internally in the nose, slightly to the left of center, with the firing barrel aligned on the aircraft's centerline, in a design choice familiar from other American fighters and reflecting the same aerodynamic rationale as the A-10's GAU-8 offset mounting. The M61A2 is lighter than its predecessor and has a higher reliability rate, important for a weapon that must function reliably from the carrier environment with its temperature extremes and vibration loads. The weapons suite carried by Super Hornets in combat is extensive and has expanded significantly over the aircraft's service life. For air-to-air engagements, the primary weapons are the AIM-120 AMRAAM in its current AIM-120D variant, a radar-guided medium to long-range missile capable of beyond visual range engagements, and the AIM-9X Sidewinder, a highly maneuverable short-range infrared-guided missile, with the ability to engage targets at extreme off-bore sight angles through cueing from the joint helmet-mounted cueing system. The JHMCS allows the pilot to designate the AIM-9X against a target simply by looking at it, with the missile seeker slaving to the pilot's head position and locking on to whatever the pilot's helmet-mounted reticle is pointing at. This off-bore sight capability fundamentally changes close-in air combat, removing the requirement to maneuver the aircraft's nose onto the target before launching. For strike missions, the Super Hornet can carry the AGM-158 JASM in its extended range variant, a stealthy, low-observable cruise missile with a range exceeding 500 miles that allows the aircraft to launch precision strikes against heavily defended targets from well outside Iran's surviving air defense systems. The AGM-84H/K Slammer, the Standoff Land Attack Missile Expanded Response, provides a smaller but highly precise standoff weapon for targets requiring very specific terminal guidance, including moving maritime targets. The AGM-65 Maverick, in various infrared and electro-optical guided variants, continues to serve for close-range precision engagement of armored and hardened targets. The Joint Direct Attack Munition family of GPS and inertial-guided bombs, from the 500-pound GBU-38 to the 2,000-pound GBU-31, provides the bulk of the aircraft's ground attack precision capability, augmented by the GBU-12 Paveway 2 and GBU-24 Paveway 3 laser-guided bombs for targets requiring terminal laser guidance. The GBU-53 Stormbreaker, also known as Small Diameter Bomb 2, is a precision glide weapon that adds tri-mode guidance combining GPS, infrared homing, and millimeter wave radar in a single, relatively small munition, allowing the aircraft to engage moving targets in adverse weather and with high precision at extended standoff ranges. The AGM-88 HARM anti-radiation missile, designed to home on the emissions of radar systems, gives the Super Hornet its suppression of enemy air defenses capability, allowing it to destroy the radar transmitters that guide surface-to-air missiles. The Super Hornet can also be configured as an aerial tanker by adding the air refueling system store on the centerline hardpoint, carrying a drogue refueling basket that other aircraft can extend a probe into and receive fuel. This buddy tanking capability replaced the dedicated S-3 Viking tanker after its retirement from carrier air wings, and it is a significant operational capability because it allows carrier air wings to extend the time on station of strike packages without requiring dedicated tanker aircraft. It does come at the cost of one combat sortie from the aircraft configured for tanking rather than strike, and managing this trade-off between strike capacity and fuel distribution is a significant part of carrier air-wing planning. The airframe of the Super Hornet incorporates a digital fly-by-wire flight control system with quadruple redundancy, first introduced in the original Hornet and carried forward into the Super Hornet. The system interprets the pilot's control inputs and translates them into precise actuator commands across all flight control surfaces, with 4 independent computers processing the same inputs simultaneously and comparing results to guard against single-point failures. The relaxed static stability of the airframe, which in a conventional aircraft would make it unflyable without active computer intervention to continuously correct its attitude, is managed entirely by the flight control computers, enabling the extreme maneuverability at high angles of attack that defines the Hornet family's handling characteristics. The leading-edge root extensions, or LERX, that run from the nose of the aircraft back to the wing leading edges are a direct inheritance from the Northrop YF-17 design from which the Hornet was derived. These distinctive triangular extensions create powerful vortices at high angles of attack, generating additional lift over the wing and maintaining stable airflow over the control surfaces at attitudes where a conventional wing would stall. The LERX are the single most visible aerodynamic reason the Hornet and Super Hornet can maintain controlled flight and weapons employment at angles of attack that would cause other aircraft to depart controlled flight. In a dogfight at slow speeds and high angles, the Hornet's LERX vortex lift gives it a decisive maneuvering advantage over aircraft without similar features. The Block 3 service life extension to 10,000 flight hours, compared to the original Super Hornet's 6,000-hour airframe life, is not merely an economic benefit, though the cost savings of not replacing aircraft earlier than necessary are substantial. It means that Super Hornets currently in service can remain operational into the 2040s, bridging the gap to whatever the Navy decides its next-generation carrier-based fighter will be. Boeing and Northrop Grumman are the final competitors in the FA-XX program, the Navy's effort to field a sixth-generation successor to the Super Hornet. Until that aircraft enters service, the Super Hornet Block 3 is the Navy's primary strike fighter, and the pace of operations in Epic Fury in 2026 makes clear it is fully earning that designation. The A-18 Hornets story begins not with the Navy at all, but with a requirement the Air Force issued in 1971 for a lightweight fighter to complement the large and expensive F-15 Eagle it was developing. The Air Force wanted to explore whether a smaller, simpler, cheaper aircraft could handle the air-to-air mission in some scenarios, freeing the expensive F-15 for the most demanding engagements. The program was called the Lightweight Fighter Competition, and it produced 2 prototypes that competed against each other. The General Dynamics YF-16, which became the F-16 Fighting Falcon, and the Northrop YF-17, which became the basis for the FA-18 Hornet. Northrop's YF-17 design, internally designated the P600 for the competition, had deep roots stretching back to the company's earliest internal studies. In 1966, Northrop began investigating a successor to its highly successful F-5 light fighter. The study, led internally by engineer Lee Begin Jr., aimed to create a light, agile, fast air superiority fighter. Development progressed through several iterations, each progressively larger and more capable. The P530 Cobra, unveiled at the 1971 Paris Air Show, was a twin-engine multi-mission design intended primarily for export customers. When the Air Force's lightweight fighter competition was announced, Northrop scaled back the P530's complexity to produce the P600, strictly an air-to-air demonstration aircraft as the competition required. Northrop received an Air Force contract in April 1972 for 2 YF-17 prototypes. The design consumed over 1 million man-hours of engineering work and 5,000 hours of wind tunnel testing. The twin vertical stabilizers, canted outward at 45 degrees, had emerged from studies showing that a single vertical stabilizer was insufficient at high angles of attack. The leading-edge root extensions were central to the design's high angle of attack performance. The first YF-17 prototype flew on June 9, 1974, at Edwards Air Force Base, with test pilot Henry Hank Chouteau at the controls. The initial flight lasted 61 minutes and reached 18,000 feet and 610 miles per hour. The Air Force's lightweight fighter competition was ultimately won by the YF-16, which became the F-16. But while the Air Force competition was ongoing, the Navy was developing its own requirement. In August 1973, Congress had mandated that the Navy pursue a lower-cost alternative to the extraordinarily expensive F-14 Tomcat, which was proving difficult to sustain in large numbers. Grumman proposed a stripped F-14 variant, and McDonnell Douglas proposed a naval adaptation of the F-15, but both alternatives were almost as expensive as the aircraft they were supposed to replace. In August 1974, Congress directed the Navy to evaluate the Air Force's lightweight fighter competitors for its own needs, calling the new program the Navy Air Combat Fighter, or NACF. The Navy rejected the YF-16 for carrier operations. A single-engine aircraft with narrow landing gear did not meet the Navy's requirements for safe carrier landings in a wide range of weather and sea state conditions, and the Navy was deeply skeptical that a design optimized for Air Force land base operations could be economically adapted to the carrier environment. On May 2, 1975, the Navy announced it had selected the YF-17 for development into its new carrier-based fighter. Northrop had no experience building carrier aircraft, a specialized discipline requiring airframe reinforcements, arresting hook systems, folding wings, and catapult attachment points, far beyond anything in a land-based design. Northrop partnered with McDonnell Douglas, whose deep experience in carrier aircraft stretched back to the F-4 Phantom II and earlier designs. On the new aircraft, the two companies agreed to split manufacturing work. McDonnell Douglas would build the forward fuselage, wings, and stabilators, while Northrop would produce the center and aft fuselage and vertical stabilizers. McDonnell Douglas was the prime contractor for the naval versions. Northrop was to have been the prime contractor for a potential land-based export version, the F-18L, which was marketed abroad but never found buyers. What emerged from the collaboration was not an adaptation of the YF-17 but an almost entirely new aircraft. To meet Navy requirements for carrier service, the airframe, undercarriage, and tailhook were structurally strengthened to withstand the violent loads of catapult launches and arrested landings. Folding wings and catapult attachment fittings were added. The landing gear was widened for better carrier deck stability, and a second nose wheel was added. To address the Navy's range requirements, McDonnell Douglas increased fuel capacity by 460 pounds, accomplished by enlarging the aircraft's dorsal spine and adding a 96-gallon fuel tank in each wing root. The aft fuselage was widened by 4 inches. The wings and stabilators were enlarged. Engines were canted outward at the front. These changes added roughly 10,000 pounds to the aircraft's gross weight. The YF-17's flight control system, which had retained mechanical controls because Northrop was not yet confident in digital fly-by-wire technology, was replaced with a fully digital fly-by-wire system with quadruple redundancy. It was the first such system installed in a production fighter aircraft, anywhere, by any country. This was not an incremental improvement over existing technology. It was a leap forward that placed the F/A-18 at the forefront of avionics sophistication for its generation. Originally, the Navy planned to acquire 3 variants: the single-seat F-18A fighter, the single-seat A-18A attack aircraft differing only in avionics, and the 2-seat TF-18A trainer with full combat capability. The economics of maintaining 2 separate but nearly identical aircraft quickly proved prohibitive. Advances in digital avionics and multifunction cockpit displays meant that a single aircraft with a single set of avionics could perform both the fighter and attack missions with equal effectiveness. Beginning in 1980, the aircraft began to be referred to informally as the FA-18, a combined designation acknowledging its dual role. The designation was officially announced on April 1, 1984. On March 1, 1977, Secretary of the Navy W. Graham Claytor announced the aircraft's official name, Hornet. The name drew on the sting and aggressiveness associated with the hornet insect and connected it to the long line of ships named USS Hornet in American naval history, stretching back to the Continental Navy vessel of the Revolutionary War. The connection to that history was not incidental. The Navy was proud of the name. The Hughes AN/APG-65 multi-mode digital radar was developed specifically for the A-18, representing one of the most capable aircraft radars of its generation. An all-digital system designed for both air-to-air and air-to-ground weapons employment, it gave the A-18 a genuine multi-mode capability that earlier aircraft could only approximate through careful avionics integration. The aircraft's maintenance philosophy was also revolutionary for a naval system of its era. The General Electric F-404 engines were designed with operability, reliability, and ease of maintenance as primary design objectives, not afterthoughts. The mean time between failures for the F-A-18 was 3 times greater than any other Navy strike aircraft. The engine's design, connecting to the airframe at just 10 points and replaceable without special equipment by a small team in under 20 minutes, set a new standard for naval aircraft supportability. 11 pre-production F/A-18 development aircraft were ordered. The first of these flew on November 18, 1978, at McDonnell Douglas's facilities in St. Louis, with company chief test pilot Jack Krings at the controls. The development flight test program continued through 1982, demonstrating the aircraft's aerodynamic characteristics, weapons integration, radar performance, and carrier compatibility. The program experienced some of the performance shortfalls common to ambitious development programs. Range fell about 8% below the original specifications despite the increased fuel capacity, and the weight growth from carrier adaptation compromised some of the performance that had made the YF-17 attractive. These shortfalls were debated extensively but ultimately judged acceptable given the aircraft's extraordinary reliability, its genuine multi-role capability, and the advanced nature of its avionics. The first production F/A-18 as were delivered to VFA-125 at Naval Air Station Lemoore, California, for fleet training in late 1980. The aircraft entered operational service with Marine Corps Strike Fighter Squadron VMFA-314, the Black Knights, at Marine Corps Air Station El Toro on January 7, 1983. The aircraft was declared fully operationally capable by that unit on that date. The first Navy squadron to achieve operational status was VFA-25 on July 1, 1984, replacing its F-4 Phantom IIs and A-7 Corsair IIs. Navy Strike Fighter Squadrons 5 and 113 made the first operational carrier deployment of the F/A-18 aboard USS Constellation from February to August 1985. The F/A-18C single-seat and F/A-18D two-seat variants, introduced beginning in 1987 and 1988 respectively, brought improved avionics, updated weapons compatibility including the AIM-120 AMRAAM and AGM-65 Maverick, and enhanced night attack capability. The C and D models became the standard production variants, with production continuing until 2000. Total production of legacy F/A-18A through D variants reached 480 aircraft across all customers. The C model's night attack capabilities, developed from 1992 onward with the enhanced performance engine F404GE402 and forward-looking infrared systems, including night vision goggles compatibility, and the ANAAS-38 Nighthawk targeting pod, transformed the aircraft's ability to operate in the dark. Night attack capability had been a significant limitation of the original Hornet, which was primarily a daylight aircraft in its initial configuration. The enhanced C models could find targets in complete darkness, designate them with a laser, and deliver precision-guided weapons with the same accuracy achievable in daylight. Marine Corps F/A-18D squadrons, which used the rear cockpit for a naval flight officer operating weapons and sensors, became particularly capable in this regime. The Blue Angels, the United States Navy's flight demonstration squadron, transitioned from the A-4 Skyhawk to the F/A-18A Hornet in 1986, a relationship that would last for 35 years. The Blue Angels flew F/A-18A B, C, and D models at airshows and special events worldwide throughout that period, before transitioning to the F/A-18E Super Hornet in late 2020. The Blue Angels' use of the aircraft for 35 continuous years, longer than they had flown any previous aircraft, reflects the Hornet's extraordinary handling qualities and the confidence the demonstration squadron community had in its reliability. The F/A-18 Hornet's combat debut came less than 3 years after its entry into service, and in a form that perfectly demonstrated what the aircraft had been designed to do. The 1986 United States military action against Libya, conducted in response to Libyan-sponsored terrorism, including the April 5 bombing of a West Berlin discotheque that killed 2 American service members, combined Air Force F-111 strike aircraft flying from bases in the United Kingdom with Navy carrier aviation from USS America and USS Coral Sea in the Mediterranean. The operation consisted of 2 distinct actions. Operation Prairie Fire in March 1986, which involved F/A-18 Hornets flying suppression of enemy air defense missions against Libyan radar sites and missile batteries, as American forces enforced navigation rights in the Gulf of Sidra, and Operation El Dorado Canyon on the night of April 14 to 15, 1986, the main strike. 4 Hornet squadrons participated: VFA-131, VFA-132, VMFA-314, and VMFA-323, all operating from the Coral Sea. During Operation El Dorado Canyon, these aircraft flew the SEAD mission, carrying AGM-88 HARM anti-radiation missiles and AGM-45 Shrike radar-killing missiles. Their task was to suppress the Libyan air defense network, protecting the targets being struck by the A-6E intruder bombers and the F-111s flying from England. It was the F/A-18's first combat action. The aircraft performed the mission without combat loss, demonstrating from its first engagement the SEAD capability that would define a significant portion of its operational career. Operation Earnest Will in 1987 and 1988 brought F/A-18s into a different kind of maritime operation. The United States Navy was escorting reflagged Kuwaiti oil tankers through the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz during the Iran-Iraq War, at a time when Iranian forces were conducting attacks on commercial shipping and laying mines in international waters. VFA-25, based aboard USS Constellation, patrolled the skies over the strait during the escort operations, providing air cover for the convoys and maintaining a presence that deterred Iranian interference from the air. The operation gave Hornet crews their first sustained experience operating over the Persian Gulf in contested conditions, and laid some of the operational groundwork for what would come 3 years later. Operation Desert Shield and Operation Desert Storm in 1990 and 1991 represent the F/A-18's most important early combat test. The Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in August 1990 triggered the largest coalition military buildup since World War II, and the Hornet was central to the naval aviation component. 14 F/A-18 squadrons were deployed to the Gulf Theater for Desert Storm. The Navy contributed 106 F/A-18 A and C model Hornets. The Marine Corps contributed 84 FA-18A C and D model aircraft. From the carrier USS Saratoga, operating in the Red Sea, and from USS Theodore Roosevelt, USS America, USS Ranger, and USS Midway, operating in the Persian Gulf and surrounding waters, Hornet crews flew missions around the clock against Iraqi targets. On the very first night of the air war, January 17, 1991, the F/A-18 achieved something that no other aircraft type had done in decades. It shot down enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat, and then continued its mission to bomb the assigned ground target. Lieutenant Commander Mark Fox and Lieutenant Nick Mongio, both assigned to VFA 81 Sunliners aboard Saratoga, were flying as part of a 4-aircraft flight en route to bomb the H-3 airfield complex in southwestern Iraq when an E-2C Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft warned them of approaching Iraqi MiG-21 fighters. The Hornets engaged the Iraqi jets in a brief, decisive combat. Fox fired an AIM-7 Sparrow radar-guided missile that destroyed one MiG. Mongillo fired an AIM-9 Sidewinder heat-seeking missile that destroyed the second. The engagement lasted approximately 1 minute. Both Hornet pilots then continued to their assigned target and destroyed it with their GBU-16 bombs, completing an air-to-air and air-to-ground mission with the same aircraft on the same sortie. It was one of the defining demonstrations of the A-18's multirole philosophy. Another pilot from the same deployment, whose name has not been widely publicized, flew a mission that illustrated the aircraft's flexibility even more vividly. He flew fighter escort for attacking A-6 intruder aircraft, used a HARM missile to destroy an enemy radar system, and then delivered bombs on an enemy airfield target, performing 3 distinct missions on a single flight with a single aircraft. Desert Storm also demonstrated the aircraft's durability. As the Naval History and Heritage Command recorded, Hornets took direct hits from surface-to-air missiles, recovered successfully, were repaired quickly, and flew again the next day. The aircraft's maintainability record in combat exceeded all pre-war estimates, with the Hornet breaking records for tactical aircraft availability, reliability, and maintainability during the Gulf War. 2 losses occurred during the conflict. On January 24, 1991, an A-18 from USS Theodore Roosevelt, piloted by Lieutenant H.E. Overs, was lost over the Persian Gulf due to an engine failure or loss of control. The pilot ejected safely and was recovered. On February 5, 1991, an F-A-18A from the same carrier piloted by Lieutenant Robert Dwyer was lost over the northern Persian Gulf after completing a successful mission to Iraq. He was listed as killed in action, his body not recovered. The years immediately following Desert Storm saw the F-A-18 deployed in the sustained enforcement operations that characterized American military engagement in the Middle East through the 1990s. Operation Southern Watch, which ran from 1992 to 2003, involved continuous patrols of the southern Iraqi no-fly zone established after the Gulf War to prevent Saddam Hussein's forces from attacking Kurdish and Shiite populations. Navy and Marine F-A-18s flew these patrols continuously for over a decade, occasionally striking Iraqi air defense assets that illuminated coalition aircraft with fire control radar. In December 1998, Operation Desert Fox, a 4-day bombing campaign against Iraqi weapons facilities and security installations, brought F-A-18s back into strike operations over Iraq. The operation was notable for its intensity. 650 sorties over 4 days, with Hornets and other aircraft striking more than 100 targets across Iraq. The campaign was criticized for its limited strategic effect, but demonstrated the Navy's ability to rapidly shift from patrol operations to intensive strike operations using the same aircraft and carrier air wings. The Balkans of the 1990s provided a different operational environment. F-A-18s participated in Operation Deny Flight, the NATO enforcement of the no-fly zone over Bosnia beginning in 1993, and in Operation Deliberate Force in August and September 1995, the 79 sorties of sustained airstrikes that ultimately forced the Bosnian Serbs to the negotiating table and ended the 3-year siege of Sarajevo. In both operations, Hornets operated from carriers in the Adriatic, a relatively short distance from targets in Bosnia-Herzegovina, conducting a mix of combat air patrol, close air support, and strike missions. Operation Allied Force in Kosovo from March to June 1999 extended the Balkans' commitment. F-A-18s flew missions against Serbian forces from carriers in the Adriatic and participated in the 78-day air campaign that compelled Serbian withdrawal from Kosovo without a ground invasion. The Kosovo campaign included one of the most celebrated air-to-air engagements of the late Cold War era for American aircraft generally, though the A-18 itself did not score air-to-air kills in that conflict. The September 11, 2001 attacks and the subsequent launch of Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan opened 2 decades of nearly continuous combat for the Super Hornet, which had by then become the primary carrier-based strike fighter. The Super Hornet had entered fleet service in 1999, replacing the F-14 Tomcat and complementing the remaining legacy Hornets, and its combat debut occurred on November 6, 2002, when aircraft from VFA-14 and VFA-41 aboard USS John C. Stennis struck air defense targets and command and control facilities in Iraq's southern no-fly zone as part of Operation Southern Watch. It was the first time the Super Hornet had fired weapons in combat. The 2001 Afghanistan campaign initially deployed the legacy F/A-18C alongside the Super Hornet. From USS Carl Vinson operating in the North Arabian Sea, which was hundreds of miles from the landlocked Afghan targets, Hornet crews flew some of the longest carrier aviation strike missions in history, relying on Air Force and Navy tanker support to extend their range into a theater that no carrier-based aircraft had ever previously had to reach. The combination of mission distance, mountainous terrain, enemy dispersal into complex urban and rural environments, and the political sensitivity of precision targeting in a densely populated country challenged Hornet crews in ways that the Gulf War never had. The aircraft performed effectively. Its ATFLIR targeting pod allowed crews to identify and track individual vehicles, buildings, and personnel from high altitude. Its Link 16 connectivity allowed integration with Special Operations Forces on the ground, who were directing strikes against Taliban and al-Qaeda leadership. When Operation Iraqi Freedom began on March 20, 2003, Super Hornets from VFA-14, VFA-41, and VFA-115 aboard USS Abraham Lincoln flew the first carrier-based strike sorties of the campaign, dropping Joint Direct Attack munitions and laser-guided bombs on Iraqi armor, Ba'ath Party command facilities, and presidential palaces in the shock and awe opening strikes. The Super Hornet's APG-73 radar, which was the initial production radar before the APG-79 AESA was introduced, provided targeting quality sufficient for the precision strikes that characterized the campaign. The aircraft's sortie generation rate in the demanding desert conditions exceeded 90%, confirming in a new theater the maintainability that had distinguished the Hornet in Desert Storm. Operation Iraqi Freedom evolved from the initial invasion phase into a sustained counterinsurgency campaign that ran from 2003 through the formal end of combat operations in 2011 and the subsequent advisory mission that continued through the decade. Throughout this period, Navy carrier air wings, including Super Hornet squadrons, rotated through the theater on regular deployments, conducting strike, close air support, reconnaissance, and tanker missions in support of ground forces across Iraq. During the 2006 to 2007 deployment of USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, VFA-103, and VFA-143, alongside legacy Hornet squadrons VFA-131 and VFA-83, dropped 140 precision-guided weapons and performed nearly 70 strafing runs against insurgent targets. The Islamic State's rise and the launch of Operation Inherent Resolve in September 2014 created the next sustained demand for Super Hornet strike operations. Navy carrier air wings operating from carriers in the eastern Mediterranean and Persian Gulf conducted thousands of airstrikes against ISIS targets across Iraq and Syria from 2014 through 2019, delivering joint direct attack munitions, laser-guided bombs, joint standoff weapons, and AGM-154 JSOW glide bombs against ISIS command centers, vehicle formations, oil infrastructure, and fortified positions. At the peak of the campaign, the Super Hornet was flying the most combat sorties of any aircraft type in Operation Inherent Resolve. On June 18, 2017, the Super Hornet achieved one of the most consequential air-to-air victories in post-Cold War American aviation. An F/A-18E from VFA-87, assigned to Carrier Air Wing 8 aboard USS George H.W. Bush, was flying close air support for Syrian Democratic Forces south of Raqqa when a Syrian Air Force Su-22 fighter dive-bombed SDF positions in the town of Jadin. Lieutenant Commander Michael Trammell, flying call sign Freedom 33, identified the Syrian aircraft, issued multiple warnings using established deconfliction channels, and when the Su-22 continued its attack on coalition-supported forces, engaged it. Trammell first fired an AIM-9X Sidewinder, which the Su-22 evaded with flares. He then locked on with an AIM-120 AMRAAM and fired, striking the Su-22's rear section and destroying it. The Syrian pilot, Captain Ali Fahd, ejected and was found alive by Syrian government forces the next day. Trammell received the Distinguished Flying Cross for the engagement in September 2018. It was the first time the United States had shot down a manned crewed aircraft since 1999. It was the first air-to-air kill for the F-ish A-18E Super Hornet variant specifically. And it was only the third air-to-air kill in the entire history of the F-A-18 family, following the two Iraqi MiG-21s destroyed in 1991. The Red Sea crisis beginning in late 2023, when Houthi rebels in Yemen began attacking commercial shipping with anti-ship missiles and one-way attack drones in solidarity with the Palestinian cause following the October 7 Hamas attacks on Israel, brought Super Hornets into a new operational environment. On January 12, 2024, U.S. Navy Super Hornets participated in coordinated strikes with Air Force and Royal Air Force aircraft against 60 Houthi targets at 16 locations, using over 100 precision-guided munitions in the opening salvo of sustained military action against Houthi military infrastructure. Through 2024 and 2025, Navy Super Hornets, operating under Operation Rough Rider, flew repeated strike missions against Houthi radar sites, missile storage facilities, launch equipment, and command infrastructure in Yemen, while simultaneously providing fleet defense against incoming Houthi missiles and drones. Multiple F/A-18 Super Hornets were lost during the Houthi campaign. In an incident widely reported in the defense press, 3 Super Hornets from USS Harry S. Truman were lost in separate incidents over a short period, 2 apparently falling into the sea during difficult ship maneuvering operations, and 1 shot down by Houthi air defense. The losses were painful reminders that sustained combat operations against an adversary with any air defense capability carry real costs. The Australian Royal Australian Air Force has operated legacy F/A-18 A and B model Hornets since 1984, taking delivery of 75 aircraft that served as Australia's primary air superiority and strike fighters for 3 decades. Australia also acquired 24 F/A-18F Super Hornets, beginning in 2010 to replace its aging F-111C strategic strike aircraft, with 12 of those aircraft subsequently converted to EA-18G Growler electronic warfare configuration. Australian F/A-18F Super Hornets conducted combat operations in Iraq beginning in 2014 as part of the international coalition against ISIS, flying strike sorties from a land base in the UAE and conducting the first armed Super Hornet missions for the Royal Australian Air Force. Canada has operated the CF-18, its variant of the FA-18A and B, since the early 1980s, deploying these aircraft in Operation Desert Storm in 1991, in Operation Allied Force over Kosovo in 1999, and in the Libya campaign in 2011 under Operation Mobile. Canadian CF-18s have served as the backbone of Canadian fighter aviation for over 4 decades, though Canada is now in the process of replacing them with F-35A aircraft. Spain operates FA-18A and B Hornets as the EF-18 Hornet, having acquired them beginning in 1986. Swiss operators flew Hornets briefly before pursuing other options. Finland operated the FA-18C&D as its primary fighter from the 1990s until transitioning to the F-35A in recent years. Kuwait has operated both Legacy Hornets and FA-18E Super Hornets, representing one of the foreign military sales that have sustained the production line through its operational life. And now, in March 2026, with Operation Epic Fury in its fourth week, a Super Hornet from VFA 87 is flying over Chabahar, Iran, shooting its cannon at targets below, and barely avoiding an Iranian Manpads missile in the process. The pilot's brake turn was textbook. The missile exploded behind the aircraft. The jet flew away. That one moment captures what the A-18 has always been: an aircraft that goes where it is sent, does what it is asked, and brings its crew home. From the Coral Sea in 1986 to the Abraham Lincoln and the Gerald R. Ford in 2026, from the Gulf War to Kosovo, to Afghanistan, to Iraq, to Syria, to the Red Sea, and now to the Strait of Hormuz and the cities of Iran, the Hornet and the Super Hornet have been the Navy's constant, the platform that carrier air wings have built their campaigns around for 43 years. It was designed from the beginning to do everything at once: fight other aircraft, destroy ground targets, suppress enemy air defenses, provide close air support, conduct reconnaissance, and refuel other aircraft. The aircraft that resulted from that ambition has been to more wars than almost any other American military aircraft in history, and in 2026 it is still fighting.